What about your company? Well, haven't you lost the contract for them?
No, honey. That's the wrong way to look at it.
The cameras were rolling, the audience was cheering, but the actor standing center stage was hiding a terrifying diagnosis. They smiled for the lens while their world crumbled behind the scenes. We are revealing the heartbreaking truth about the legends we lost too soon. The story of the boy from Little House on the Prairie is absolutely crushing. 1. Robert Reed.
Difficult to do, not so much for the adults because we're grown actors, but for the kids.
If you grew up watching TV in the 70s, Robert Reed was the dad everyone wanted. As Mike Brady on The Brady Bunch, he was the calm, wise architect who could solve any problem with a simple lecture in the den. He was the picture of stability. But the thing nobody tells you is that Robert Reed was living a life filled with constant anxiety. While he was playing the perfect straight family man on screen, off-screen, he was a gay man living in a time when that was not accepted, especially for a TV dad. He had to keep his true self completely hidden from the public eye. It wasn't just his orientation that he had to hide. Robert viewed himself as a serious Shakespearean actor. He actually hated the silly scripts of the Brady Bunch. He would often get into arguments with the show's creator because he felt the jokes were too nonsensical, but he stayed because of the family he built with the cast. Years later, tragedy struck. In 1991, Robert was diagnosed with colon cancer. But that was not the whole story. Doctors also discovered he was HIV positive. This was a massive shock to his TV family. When he passed away in 1992, the news was kept very quiet. His co-star, Barry Williams, who played Greg Brady, later said that Robert did not want to go there publicly because he knew it would destroy the wholesome image of the Brady family. It is heartbreaking to think that the man who gave so much love to millions of kids through the TV screen felt he couldn't share his own truth. He died protecting his TV family until the very end. While Robert Reed hid his secret to protect a wholesome image, our next star was known for being a wild comedic genius. But his sudden decline left fans asking serious questions that went unanswered for years. 2. Michael Jeter.
Education debt, and it's not going to take 12 years to do, like neurosurgery.
You might remember Michael Jeter as the incredibly funny small assistant Herman Stiles on the hit show Evening Shade. He had this amazing energy, like a cartoon character come to life. He even won an Emmy for the role because he could make anyone laugh just by walking into a room. He seemed full of life and joy. But behind that energetic smile, Michael was dealing with a heavy burden. In 1996, Michael did something very brave. He decided to stop hiding. He went public with the fact that he was HIV positive. At the time, this was a career-risking move. People in Hollywood were terrified of the virus, and many actors were fired just for rumors. But Michael wanted to control his own story. He said he was tired of the whispers and the fear. He wanted to show people that you could live and work and be happy even with the diagnosis. Sadly, his battle was not easy. Though he continued to work in huge movies like The Green Mile, his health eventually caught up with him. In 2003, he was found in his Hollywood home, having passed away at the age of 50. The official cause was an epileptic seizure, but it was complicated by his long battle with the virus. He left behind a legacy of laughter and incredible bravery. Michael Jeter tried to be open about his struggle, but our next actor was a heartthrob who had to fight rumors his entire career, and his final days were a tragic mystery that broke hearts across the globe. 3. Tom Villard.
For the folks at home,
Do it again, I can always hear it.
if you give a description or part of the answer, then you'll hear this sound.
Tom Villard was one of those faces you saw everywhere in the 80s. He was the handsome, charming guy in the show We Got It Made. He had a bright smile and a friendly energy that made him perfect for sitcoms. He was young, talented, and it looked like he had a long career ahead of him. But in the early 90s, fans noticed he started looking different. He was thinner, and his energy seemed to fade. The rumors started flying around town. People were whispering that he was sick. Instead of hiding it, Tom decided to face the music. In 1994, he went on a talk show and announced to the world that he was battling the virus. It was a moment of pure vulnerability. He talked about how hard it was to get insurance and how people treated him differently. He said he wanted to be a face for the disease so people would stop being so afraid. It is really sad to say that just a few months after that interview, Tom passed away. He was only 40 years old. Pneumonia, which is a common complication for people with compromised immune systems, took him from us. He spent his final days surrounded by friends, but his potential was cut short. He was one of the first of his generation of sitcom stars to be so open, paving the way for others. Speaking of heartthrobs, the next actor on our list was a star of one of the biggest nighttime soaps ever. But his exit from the show was filled with controversy and bad blood that lasted until his final breath. 4. Dak Rambo.
Dream was to get out and do something. I don't know what I was going to do, but I thought maybe to be a movie star. Not to...
Dak Rambo had a name that sounded like an action movie star, and he had the looks to match. He played Jack Ewing on the massive hit show Dallas, and also appeared in various sitcoms like The Guns of Will Sonnet. He was at the top of his game, playing the handsome bad boy that audiences loved to hate. But in 1991, his world turned upside down. Dak discovered he had tested positive for the virus. What happened next is a bit of a Hollywood horror story. According to Dak, once the producers of his show found out about his condition, his character suddenly started to disappear. He felt he was being pushed out because of the stigma. He eventually quit the show and decided to speak out against the industry. He said they were hypocrites who only cared about image. He spent his final years as an advocate, trying to educate people and fighting against the fear that had cost him his career. He passed away in 1994 at the age of 52. To put it mildly, he went out fighting, refusing to let the industry silence him. His story is a harsh reminder of how cruel Hollywood could be during the height of the panic. While Dak fought against the system, our next star was a young man who played a space traveler in movies and a quirky student on TV, and his loss was felt deeply by the sci-fi community. 5. Merritt Butrick.
To tell Savick that how we face death is at least as important as how we face life.
Merritt Butrick was a unique talent. He is most famous for playing Captain Kirk's son, David, in the Star Trek movies. But sitcom fans knew him as the funny and weird Johnny Slash on the show Square Pegs. He had this intense, quirky vibe that made him stand out. He was brilliant at playing characters who were a little bit on the edge. But in real life, Merritt was dealing with demons that nobody saw. He was very private about his personal life. When he started getting sick in the late 80s, he kept it a total secret from the public. He continued to work as much as he could, delivering intense performances even as his health was failing. Those who worked with him said he was always professional, but they could see he was fading. He passed away in 1989 at the tragically young age of 29. Pneumonia was the cause, driven by the underlying virus. It was a shock to his fans, who expected him to have a huge career. He was just getting started. His death was a quiet tragedy, a young light snuffed out before it could truly shine. Merritt was a young talent gone too soon, but our next actor was a veteran of the stage and screen who brought a touch of class to every role until a shocking diagnosis forced him to bow out. 6. Leonard Frey. Leonard Frey was an actor's actor. He was nominated for an Oscar for Fiddler on the Roof, but sitcom lovers knew him from his hilarious roles in shows like The Best of the West and guest spots on The Mary Tyler Moore Show. He had a sharp wit and a distinctive voice that made him perfect for comedy. He could deliver a line with a dry sarcasm that was unmatched. But behind the scenes, Leonard was fighting a difficult battle. Like many men of his generation in the theater world, he saw friends dying all around him. When he received his own diagnosis, it was a devastating blow. He tried to keep working, but the physical toll was too great. He passed away in 1988 at the age of 49 in New York City. At the time, the New York theater community was being decimated by the epidemic. Leonard's death was another heavy stone on a community that was already grieving. He is remembered as a brilliant performer who could do it all, from singing to slapstick comedy. From the stage to the prairie, our next actor played the husband of one of the most famous TV villains of all time, and his real-life story was filled with love and tragedy. 7. Steve Tracy.
No right to be dealing with the public, and as pretty as you are, you don't need a restaurant to catch a husband in the first.
Steve Tracy is a name that Little House on the Prairie fans know well. He played Percival Dalton, the short, feisty man who married the town bully, Nellie Olson. Their relationship was one of the best parts of the show. Percival was the only son, who could tame Nellie, and the chemistry between Steve and actress Allison Arngrim was real. They were best friends in real life, but Steve had a secret that he only shared with his closest friends. He was battling the virus. The thing many people overlooked was how close the cast of that show really was. When Steve got sick, Allison Arngrim was right there by his side. She watched her on-screen husband fade away. Steve wanted to be open about it, but in the mid-'80s, it was still very risky. He passed away in 1986 at the age of 30. It was devastating for the Little House family. After his death, Allison Arngrim became a huge activist for AIDS awareness. She said she did it for Steve. His legacy lives on, not just in the reruns, but in the work his friend did to save others. Steve Tracy found support in his co-star, but our next actor was a tough guy on screen who hid his condition because he was terrified it would ruin his macho image. 8. Brad Davis.
And it'll last forever. When this generation, with its mores, and whatever goes on, and another generation comes up and its mores change.
Brad Davis was an intense actor. He became famous for the movie Midnight Express, but he also appeared in the phenomenal miniseries Roots and had guest roles in various TV shows. He was known for playing gritty, tough characters. He had a raw energy that exploded on screen. In 1985, Brad was diagnosed with the virus. He was terrified. He believed that if Hollywood found out, he would never work again. He thought they would see him as a liability. So he and his wife created an elaborate scheme to keep it a secret. He would go to the hospital under fake names and pay for his medication with cash so there would be no paper trail. He lived in constant fear of being exposed. He managed to keep the secret until virtually the day he died. In 1991, at the age of 41, he passed away. It was only after his death that his wife revealed the truth in a book. She wanted people to know the extreme lengths he had to go to just to keep his job. It was a heartbreaking look at the fear that ruled the industry. Brad Davis hid in the shadows, but our next actor was a bright light on a daytime soap and a sitcom guest star who faced his fate with a quiet dignity that inspired everyone around him. 9. Keith Christopher.
Everything I do has always kind of been influenced by hip-hop. I don't know if you heard the Outkast sample that we played.
Keith Christopher was a talented actor and musician who made his mark on the soap opera Another World and appeared in sitcoms like Murphy Brown. He was known for his incredible hair and his rock and roll vibe. He was an artist through and through. When Keith was diagnosed, he didn't hide away. He continued to create art. In fact, his storyline on the soap opera mysteriously mirrored his real-life struggles with illness, though they didn't explicitly call it the virus on the show. He brought a raw realism to his performances because he was living it. He passed away in 1998. Those who knew him said he kept his spirit up until the end. He was a reminder that the disease didn't discriminate between the famous and the struggling artist. He was a working actor who gave everything to his craft. While Keith kept working, Keith kept. Our next star was a regular on one of the most popular spin-offs of all time, playing a lawyer who had a secret life that eventually caught up with him. 10. Mark Stevens. Mark Stevens might not be a household name like Robert Reed, but if you watched TV in the 70s and 80s, you saw his face. He had a recurring role on The DA and popped up in many sitcoms of the era. He was a reliable character actor who could play the professional businessman or the neighbor next door. Mark was part of the old guard of Hollywood. He had been around since the 40s, but in the 90s, he fell ill. Like many men of his generation, he was very private. He moved to Spain to live out his final years away from the prying eyes of the paparazzi. He passed away in 1994 at the age of 73. His death was attributed to heart failure, but it was widely reported in the industry that it was brought on by complications from the virus. He belonged to a generation that believed privacy was everything, and he took his secrets to the grave. Mark Stevens sought privacy in Europe, but our next entry is a man who gave life to a puppet that was more famous than he was, and his death left a silence on stage that could never be filled. 11. Wayland Flowers.
I'll say what I do with her, like just me.
You could.
This lady came backstage one time, I thought she put it very succinct.
Wayland Flowers was a brilliant puppeteer. He was famous for his character Madame, a grumpy, sharp-tongued old lady puppet. Together they had a sitcom called Madame's Place, and were regulars on the comedy circuit. Wayland was the man behind the curtain, but Madame was the star. She could say things that no human could get away with. Wayland was openly gay and a huge part of the comedy scene, but in the late 80s, during a performance, he collapsed on stage. It was a shocking moment for the audience. It was the first sign that something was seriously wrong. He had been battling the virus privately, but his body was giving out. He passed away in 1988 at the age of 48. Madame was retired for a long time after his death. It felt wrong for anyone else to voice her. Wayland was one of those unique performers who created something totally original, and the epidemic robbed us of his genius way too early. Wayland left behind a silent puppet, but our next actor was the man behind some of the most beloved Muppets in history, and his loss broke the heart of the Jim Henson Company. 12. Richard Hunt. You might not know Richard Hunt's face, but you definitely know his voice. He was the man behind Scooter, Beaker, and Statler in The Muppets. He also performed on Sesame Street and appeared on camera in many sitcoms as a guest. He had a chaotic, high-energy style that made his characters unforgettable. Richard was a huge personality on set. He was loud, funny, and everyone loved him. But in the early 90s, the Muppet family was hit hard. First, Jim Henson died, and then Richard got sick. He had known about his diagnosis for a while, but kept working to bring joy to children. He passed away in 1992, just 2 years after Jim Henson. He was only 40 years old. The Muppet movies and shows that followed had to recast his iconic characters, but fans always felt that something was missing. His manic energy was the heartbeat of the Muppets, and it was extinguished by the virus. From the world of puppets to the world of high school drama, our next actor played a teacher on a hit show who tried to guide his students while he was lost in his own health battle. 13. Larry Riley.
I believe she can see us now, and it would break her heart to know that her baby turned out to be like this.
Larry Riley was a handsome, talented actor, best known for playing Frank Williams on the long-running primetime soap Knots Landing. While Knots Landing was a drama, it had the structure of a serial that millions tuned into weekly. Larry's character was a fan favorite. He was a singer and a strong presence on the show. Larry was a trailblazer for African American actors on primetime soaps. But in 1992, tragedy struck. He died of kidney failure, which was a direct complication of the virus. What many overlooked was that Larry had been losing weight rapidly in his final season. The producers tried to hide it with baggy clothes and camera angles, but the viewers noticed. He was only 39 years old. His death was a massive blow to the show. He was written out abruptly, and it left a hole in the cast. Larry was a talent who was just reaching his peak when he was taken. Larry Riley was a primetime star, but our next actor was a dancer who lit up the screen in a show about fame, only to have his own fame fade into a tragic struggle for survival. 14. Gene Anthony. Ray.
Kind of hard to see what it's going to be like when I get back to New York. And all my friends have seen it already.
Remember the song Fame? I'm Gonna Live Forever. Gene Anthony Ray played Leroy Johnson, the incredible dancer in the movie Fame and the sitcom TV series that followed. He was raw, untrained, and absolutely electric. He didn't just play a dancer. He was the real deal, plucked from obscurity to become a star. But Gene's life was chaotic. He struggled with the pressures of fame. After the show ended, he had a hard time finding work. Rumors of substance issues followed him, but the real battle was with his health. He was diagnosed with the virus in the mid-90s. He passed away in 2003 after suffering a stroke related to his condition. He was 41. It is a cruel irony that the man who danced to a song about living forever died so young. He died in almost total obscurity, a far cry from the days when his face was on lunchboxes and posters in bedrooms across America. Gene Anthony Ray danced his way into our hearts, but our next actor was a tough guy from the streets of New York who brought a menacing charm to sitcoms and dramas alike. 15. Ray Sharkey.
To drive when they've been drinking. Plan ahead. Choose a designated driver.
Ray Sharkey was the ultimate wise guy. He became famous for the show Wise Guy and appeared in many sitcoms playing the tough, street-smart character. He had a dangerous charisma that made him magnetic to watch. He was on the fast track to becoming a legend like De Niro or Pacino, but Ray had a dangerous lifestyle off-screen. He struggled with severe substance issues for years. In the late 80s, he was diagnosed with the virus. He was in deep denial. He refused to believe it was happening to him. He kept working, delivering intense performances even as he was wasting away. In 1993, he passed away at age 40. Towards the end, he weighed only 80 pounds. It was a horrific transformation for a man who had been so full of life and aggression. His story is a cautionary tale of talent consumed by demons and disease. Ray Sharkey's denial was tragic, but our next actor was a sweet, funny presence on a show about aliens whose life ended just as he was becoming a cult hero. 16. Timothy Patrick Murphy.
The idea is the same?
Not exactly. We don't farm. We raise cattle.
Timothy Patrick Murphy was the all-American boy. He had blue eyes, blonde hair, and a winning smile. He is best known for playing Mickey Trotter on Dallas, but he was a frequent guest on sitcoms like The Love Boat and Search for Tomorrow. He had a softness to him that made audiences trust him immediately. Timothy was another actor who lived a very private life. He knew that being open about his orientation in the 80s would end his career as a heartthrob. When he got sick, he retreated from the spotlight. He wanted people to remember him as the healthy, vibrant young man he was on screen. He passed away in 1988 at the age of 29. It is shocking how many of these actors died in their late 20s or early 30s. Timothy was a victim of the time, a young man who had to hide who he was and died before he could ever truly be himself. Timothy was a heartthrob who vanished, but our next star was a character actor whose face you would recognize instantly, even if you didn't know his name, until his obituary revealed the truth. 17. David Collins.
As much an arse nugget as every world leader.
Yeah. Not mentioning any names, you know.
But he's not aggressive at all.
David Collins was not a superstar, but he was a working actor who popped up in The Jeffersons and other classic sitcoms. He was the guy who played the store clerk, the waiter, the funny neighbor. He was part of the fabric of TV. David was a veteran of the Broadway stage as well. But like so many in the theater community, the epidemic found him. He passed away in 1991 at the age of 45. His obituary noted that he lived hard and worked hard. He was one of the thousands of working actors who kept the industry running, who were wiped out by the disease. His story reminds us that it wasn't just the big names who were lost. It was the supporting players, the people who made the sitcom world feel populated and real. From a supporting player to a soap opera legend, our next actor was a pioneer for African American men on daytime TV. But his life was cut short by a battle he couldn't win. 18. Robert Christian. Robert Christian made history as the first black regular on the soap opera Another World. He also brought his talents to sitcoms like The Cosby Show. He was a dignified, powerful actor with a voice that commanded attention. He opened doors for many actors who came after him, but Robert was fighting a silent war. He was diagnosed with the virus in the early days of the epidemic. He continued to work, bringing grace to every role, but his health began to fail him. He passed away in 1983. At the age of 43, he was one of the very early casualties. Because it was so early in the epidemic, there was very little information and a lot of fear. His death was a wake-up call to the New York acting community that something terrible was happening. Robert Christian was an early loss, but our next actor was a goofy, lovable presence in a show about the military, whose death was surrounded by rumors for decades. 19. Frank Parker. Frank Parker was a familiar face on daytime TV, spending years on Days of Our Lives, but he also had comedic chops that landed him roles in sitcom pilots and guest spots. He had a grandfatherly, trustworthy face. Frank passed away later than many on this list, leaving us in 2018. However, reports surfaced that he had been living with the virus for many years. His complications included dementia and Parkinson's, which can be exacerbated by the long-term effects of the virus. His story is different because he survived the darkest days of the 80s and 90s. He lived to see treatments improve, but the long-term toll on his body was undeniable. He represents the survivors who still carried the scars of the epidemic. We have covered heartthrobs and character actors, but our final story is about a man who played a villain on a show about a superhero and whose death was a shock to the fan convention circuit. 20. Irving Metzman. Irving Metzman was a character actor with a very specific look. He often played the nervous guy, the sidekick, or the minor villain. He appeared in the movie War Games and had guest spots on sitcoms like Family Ties. He was a "hey, it's that guy" kind of actor. Irving was working steadily in the 80s, but then he just stopped. He disappeared from the screen. It turned out he had fallen ill. He passed away in 1994. Like so many others, his career was frozen in time. He is remembered by fans of 80s cinema and TV as a unique face that added flavor to every scene he was in.